High up in the mountains, where the trees grew thick and the air was cold all the time, there lived a man who had spent most of his life in complete isolation. He had chosen this life long ago, when the world had seemed too loud and too full of people. He had wanted peace, and the quiet of the mountains seemed like a refuge. At first the man had built his cabin himself from rough logs and stones. He had chopped wood in the forest and carried water from a small stream that ran down the slope behind. His home, he knew every tree, every rock, and every trail around his little domain. He had learned to live with what he could find and what he could make with his hands. The mountains were not kind, but they were predictable, unlike people who could change in an instant. He had lived like this for many years without any visitor and without much human contact. He had grown used to the sound of the wind in the pine needles, the distant call of birds, and the crunch of snow under his feet. In the long winters, he hunted small animals and fished in the streams. He grew some vegetables in a small patch near the cabin, and he stored dried meat for the long, cold months. He was strong in his youth and capable of doing almost anything he needed to survive, but over time, his body began to change, and he noticed it slowly. At first, he would feel tired faster than he used to, and small aches would appear in his back and chest. He tried to ignore them because he had always been self-reliant. But the aches grew worse, and he could no longer lift heavy logs or carry water as easily as before. First he thought it was just age catching up to him, but soon it became clear that something more serious was wrong. He felt short of breath even. When he walked slowly, he would cough, and sometimes see blood on the snow where he had spit. It scared him, but he had no one to talk to and no one to help. He thought about leaving the mountains and seeking help in the towns below, but the thought of leaving his home and all he had built was unbearable. The mountains had become a part of him, and the idea of going down to the towns with their noise and people was frightening. The man began to ration his food even more carefully. He knew that if he became too weak, he would not be able to care for himself in the cold months ahead. He tried to hunt, but he missed more than he used to, and the animals seemed harder to find. Spent hours walking through the forest looking for something to eat, and returned with nothing more than a few roots and some berries. He would eat them slowly, trying to make them last. He often sat by the fire in the evening and thought about what his life had become. He remembered when he had felt strong and free, and he wondered if he would ever feel that way again. He thought about the winters ahead and felt a deep fear. He remembered the last winter when he had almost frozen his hands while chopping wood. He realized that this winter he might not have the strength to survive. He had only a few logs left, and the snow had already begun to fall. He tried to ignore the fear and focus on small tasks. He gathered wood and tried to repair the cabin roof where the snow might leak through, but every movement was slow and painful, and he felt his body weakening more with each day. Despite the pain and fear, he tried to keep some routine. Wake before the sun and light a small fire to warm the cabin. He would drink cold water from the stream and eat a small meal. He would check his traps and try to catch something for food. He would walk through the forest to gather firewood and then return to the cabin to rest. Sometimes he would sit on the small porch and look out at the mountains, feeling both peace and despair. The mountains were beautiful with their snow-covered peaks and endless forests, but they also felt like a prison. When he was sick and alone, he began to feel lonely in a way he had never felt before. He had chosen solitude, but now it felt like a punishment. He remembered talking to people long ago, laughing and sharing stories. He wondered if he had made a mistake by leaving the world behind. He would sometimes shout into the mountains, hoping that someone might hear him, hoping that he was not completely alone, but the wind would carry his voice away, and he would be left in silence again. As the days passed, he noticed that even small tasks became dangerous. One morning, while chopping wood, he felt dizzy and fell to the ground. He tried to get up, but his legs would not hold him. He lay there for hours, feeling the cold seep into his bones. He thought he might die there in the snow. He closed his eyes and tried to remember warm days and sunshine to keep his mind from panicking. When he finally managed to crawl back to the cabin, he realized that he could no longer handle life in the mountains alone. He needed help, but he did not know where to find it, and he feared that asking for help meant leaving everything he had built. He began to think more seriously about his life and his choices. He thought about the people he had left behind and the life he had given up for solitude. He thought about the winters he had survived and the strength he had. Once had he wondered if he had wasted his years living alone in the mountains. He felt sadness and regret, but he also felt a strange determination to survive. He realized that even if he could not do everything alone, he would try to do as much. As he could each day became a test of endurance, he would drag himself out of bed and try to complete small chores. He would tend to the fire and keep it burning through the night. He would try to eat enough to keep his strength. He would sit by the window and watch the snow fall and think about what life had brought him. He felt fear and despair, but also a quiet hope that somehow he would make it through. One morning he woke to find that the snow had fallen heavily and blocked the small trail. To the stream he could not get water, and his fire was running low. He realized that he might have to leave the cabin to find water, or he would not survive the next few days. He wrapped himself in all the blankets he had and slowly made his way. Through the snow he stumbled many times, and his chest hurt with every step. He felt the cold biting into his skin, and the fear of death growing stronger with each passing moment. He finally reached the stream and knelt to drink the icy water. He felt weak and his body trembled. He realized that he could no longer do what he had done in the past. He had always been strong and capable, but now he was fragile and vulnerable. He sat by the stream for a long time, feeling the cold and thinking about how much his life had changed. He realized that he might not survive alone in the mountains much longer. As he returned to the cabin, he thought about what he could do next. He knew that he needed help, but he had no one to turn to. He thought about the towns far below and wondered if he could make the journey. He felt both fear and hope. He knew that leaving meant risking everything he had built, but staying meant risking death. He sat by the fire and stared into the flames, trying to decide what to do. He realized that he had lived a life of independence and solitude, but now he needed something he had never needed before: human kindness and care. He did not know where it would come from, or if it would come at all. He thought about the possibility of meeting someone who could help him, and the thought gave him a small spark of hope. He decided that he would wait and see if fate would bring someone to him. Someone who could help him survive the harsh winter and perhaps change his life forever. The days passed slowly, and each day brought new challenges. He would wake with pain in his body and struggle to do the simplest tasks. He would sit by the window and watch the snow fall and think about life and death. He would remember the warmth of the sun on his back, the sound of laughter, and the touch of another person. He realized how much he had missed in his pursuit of solitude. One cold evening, as he sat by the fire, he thought about the long journey ahead if he tried to leave the mountains. He thought about the towns with their noise and people, and he felt both fear and longing. He wanted to survive and he wanted to live again, but he did not know how. He wondered if anyone could find him in the vast wilderness. If he tried to call for help, he felt a deep sense of helplessness and realized that he could not do everything alone. He spent the night thinking about what the future might bring. He felt fear and uncertainty, but he also felt a quiet determination. He realized that even in the most difficult circumstances, there was always a chance for something unexpected to happen. He thought about the possibility of meeting someone who could help him, someone who could bring warmth and care into his lonely life. He closed his eyes and held on to that thought as he drifted into a restless sleep. The mountain man had survived the coldest nights and the heaviest snow, but his body had grown weaker, and the long winters seemed harder than ever before. Every morning he woke with a pain that ran through his chest and limbs. He moved slowly from the bed, made of rough blankets, to the small stove, where he would light a fire that barely kept the cabin warm. The wood he had stored was running low, and he knew that the next snowfall might bury him under a blanket of white that he could not escape. He tried to hunt and trap as he had done before, but his strength had left him and the animals seemed smarter or more elusive. He would drag himself through the forest, sometimes for hours, and return with nothing. He would sit by the fire and stare at the empty hands that once could do everything. He thought about how the world had grown so large and so distant, and how he had grown smaller and weaker in comparison. One morning, as he tried to gather water from the stream, he slipped on the ice and fell. He lay there for a long time, feeling the cold biting into his skin and the fear rising in his chest. He realized that if he fell again, he might not get up. Struggled to crawl back to the cabin and when he reached it, he leaned against the door and thought about how fragile he had become. The mountains that had seemed strong and reliable now felt like a trap. He spent hours resting by the fire, thinking about what he could do. He remembered the stories his family had told him long ago about people helping each other in times of need. He thought about how he had once laughed and shared meals and how now he was alone. He felt a deep sadness that seemed to grow with each passing day. He wondered if he would survive the winter or if he would fade away quietly in the cold. Snow continued to fall, and the days grew shorter. The wind howled outside, and the trees bent under the weight of ice. He would sit in the cabin and listen to the sound of the storm and think about the life he had lived. The isolation he had once chosen now felt like a prison. He wanted warmth and care, but he did not know how to find it in the vast wilderness. He tried to keep himself busy with small tasks. He repaired the roof of the cabin to prevent snow from falling inside. He chopped the last remaining pieces of wood he could carry. He cleaned the small windows so that he could see the mountains and the forest beyond. He thought that if he could survive until spring, he might find a way to get help. But each day was harder than the last. One evening, as the sky turned gray and the wind grew stronger, he heard a distant sound that made him pause. It was faint and unclear, but it sounded like someone calling. He strained his ears and looked out the small window, but all he saw was the endless white of snow and trees swaying in the wind. He wondered if his mind was playing tricks on him. He had not heard a human voice in many years, and the thought of hearing one again made his heart beat faster. He spent the night listening for the sound. He lit a fire and huddled close to it, trying to stay warm and awake. He thought about the possibility of someone finding him, or of being able to call for help. He felt a small spark of hope. Mixed with fear, he knew that if he tried to leave the cabin, he might not survive the cold, but if he stayed alone, he might not survive either. He closed his eyes and tried to imagine a world where he could be safe and cared for. Next morning, he awoke to find that the snow had fallen even deeper. He struggled to move through the cabin and gather what little food he had left. He ate slowly and tried to conserve energy. His chest hurt and his breathing was labored. But he pushed himself to walk to the small patch of garden where he had grown a few vegetables. He dug through the snow and found some roots that he could eat. He felt a small victory in having something to eat, but he knew it would not last long. Days passed with the same struggle. He felt the cold in his bones and the weakness in his muscles. He remembered the warmth of the sun on his back and the laughter of people he had known. Long ago, he realized that he had been proud of his independence, but now he understood that pride alone could not keep him alive. He needed help and he needed care, but he did not know where to find it. One afternoon, while trying to gather firewood, he noticed a shadow moving between the trees. He froze and watched carefully. The shadow moved closer, and he saw the shape of a person walking slowly through the snow. The man felt a mixture of fear and hope. His heart raced as he wondered who could be in the mountains at this time of year and why they would come so far from the towns below. The person moved closer, and he could see a figure wrapped in warm white clothing carrying a small pack. The figure seemed determined but careful. The mountain man wanted to call out, but his voice was weak and hoarse. He struggled to his feet and waved his hand as best as he could, hoping to get attention. The figure noticed him and slowed down and then came closer still. The person spoke softly and asked if he was okay. The mountain man tried to answer, but his voice barely came out. He felt a strange relief that someone had finally appeared. He realized that he had not expected anyone to come, and that the sight of another human being brought a comfort. He had almost forgotten. The stranger carefully approached and offered help. He brought supplies and knew how to treat people in the cold wilderness. The mountain man felt a mix of relief and disbelief. He had survived so long on his own, and now someone had come to help him in a way he had never imagined. Over the next few days, the stranger stayed nearby. The mountain man watched as she made small fires and prepared simple meals. He felt warmth in the cabin that he had not felt in many months. The stranger spoke kindly and offered comfort. He listened and nodded and began to feel a sense of trust forming. He realized that he could allow someone to care for him without losing the life he had built. As the stranger helped him recover, he learned new ways to manage his illness. He took medicine and rested more than he had in years. He began to regain small amounts of strength. He could walk a little further each day, and the tasks that had seemed impossible began to feel possible. Again, the mountains were still harsh, but he no longer felt trapped. He had help, and he had hope. He thought about how different life felt with another person nearby. The silence that had once been peaceful now felt lonely without the presence of someone to share it with. He began to speak more and share memories from his past. He laughed softly at stories that he had almost forgotten. He realized that human connection was as important as food and warmth. The snow continued to fall, and the cold remained, but the mountain man no longer felt completely helpless. He had someone who cared, and he felt a small spark of hope that he could survive the winter. The stranger did not leave, and the mountain man felt gratitude that was deeper than he could express. He realized that miracles could happen even in the most unlikely places, and that sometimes survival depended not just on strength, but on the kindness of another. Days turned into weeks, and the mountain man began to regain more of his strength. He could move around the cabin in the forest with more confidence. He helped the stranger with small tasks and began to feel useful again. The bond between them grew quietly and steadily as each day passed. The mountain man realized that his life was changing in ways he had never imagined, and that the isolation he had once cherished could be replaced by companionship and caravan. As the winter pressed on the mountain, man felt a quiet determination. He had survived the worst of the cold, and he was beginning to believe that he could survive much more. He knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but he felt ready to face it. He had learned that asking for help was not weakness, and that life could be shared, even in the most remote and harsh places. As he lay by the fire each night, he thought about the stranger and the small miracles that had brought her to him. He realized that life could be unpredictable and that hope could appear when it was needed. Mosi closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the cabin and the presence of another person nearby, and for the first time in many months, he felt a sense of peace and possibility. The mountain man began to feel stronger each day as the stranger stayed nearby and offered care and support. He watched as she moved with determination through the snow, bringing supplies and tending to the small fire that kept the cabin warm. He realized that he could no longer rely solely on his own strength, and that the kindness and knowledge of another person were helping him survive the harsh winter. He tried to do small tasks to help, but found that even the simplest chores were still difficult. His body ached, and his chest burned when he walked too far. He would chop small pieces of wood and carry them to the stove, and then rest for long minutes before trying again. He felt a strange mixture of frustration and relief. He wanted to do more, but he knew that pushing too hard could be dangerous. The stranger encouraged him gently to rest and to eat regularly. She would bring him small portions of food that were easy to digest and remind him to drink water. He noticed that the simple meals began to make a difference, and that his strength was returning. Slowly, the fire in the cabin seemed brighter and warmer with her presence, and he began to feel hope that he could make it. Through the long winter, they would sit by the fire in the evenings and talk quietly. The mountain man shared memories of his life before the mountains, the days of work and laughter, and the people he had known. He spoke softly and listened as the stranger spoke of her own experiences of helping people in the wild. He began to understand that the world outside the mountains was not as dangerous as he had imagined, and that there were people willing to care for others, even in difficult circumstances. Weather outside remained harsh. The wind howled through the trees and the snow continued to fall, but inside the cabin, there was a small sense of warmth and security. He realized that he had been living in fear for so long that he had forgotten how it felt to trust someone. He began to relax when the stranger was near, and even smiled when she made small jokes about the cold and the snow. The days were still challenging. The mountain man struggled to walk far distances, and the snow made every step difficult. He would sometimes slip and fall, but the stranger was always nearby to help him get back on his feet. She taught him ways to move more safely in the snow and to use his body without causing too much strain. He began to feel more confident and less fearful of the harsh terrain. One day he fell while trying to gather firewood. He had slipped on ice and landed hard on his side. His chest hurt and he could barely breathe. The stranger rushed to his side and helped him back to the cabin. She cleaned his small wounds and wrapped him in blankets. She made warm tea and sat with him until he felt steady enough to rest. He realized that if he had been alone, he might not have survived that fall. He felt gratitude deep in his heart for the stranger who had come to help him. Over the next few weeks, the mountain man continued to regain strength. His breathing improved, and his muscles grew stronger. He could walk longer distances and even carry small logs to the cabin without falling. He still felt pain, but it was less severe than before, and he felt a sense of accomplishment in each small victory. The stranger encouraged him and praised his efforts. She reminded him to be patient and to allow his body to heal fully. Began to work together to make the cabin more secure for the winter. The stranger helped repair the roof and reinforce the walls. She also showed him how to gather water safely and how to prepare food in a way that required less effort. He realized that with guidance he could manage the tasks that had seemed impossible on his own. He felt a renewed sense of purpose in helping. To care for himself and the cabin, the mountain man began to appreciate the companionship more than he had expected. He had lived alone for so long that the presence of another person felt strange at first, but gradually it became comforting, Longer felt completely isolated, and he began to look forward to each day, knowing that someone cared for his well-being. He also noticed that his mind was sharper, and his spirits lifted when he had someone to share thoughts with, despite the progress he had made. He still faced moments of fear and doubt. He would lie awake at night worrying about the future, and whether the snow would continue to fall endlessly. He worried about illness and accidents, and whether he could survive without help. The stranger would often sense his anxiety and sit with him quietly until he felt calm again, never judged him for his fears, and simply offered steady support, which gave him a sense of security. Bond between them grew as they shared stories and experiences. The mountain man spoke of the mountains and the solitude he had chosen long ago. He spoke of the loneliness and the peace he had felt. He also spoke of regret and the realization that being alone could be dangerous in times of illness. In cold, he began to see that companionship was not a weakness, but a strength that could help him survive. They spent long hours by the fire on days when the snowstorm kept them inside. The mountain man would watch the flames, and the stranger would read from a small book she had brought. She taught him about herbs and remedies that could help with his condition, and showed him how to use them safely. He began to learn things he had never known before and felt empowered by this knowledge. The small cabin seemed less like a prison and more like a place of learning and recovery. The winter was still harsh, but the mountain man no longer felt defeated. He faced the cold with determination and courage. He would walk to the small garden too, checked for vegetables and roots, and returned with what he could carry. He learned to store food safely and to ration supplies wisely. The stranger praised his careful planning and reminded him that every small step mattered as days turned into weeks. The mountain man noticed changes in himself. He could breathe more easily, and his muscles felt stronger. He could chop wood and carry it to the cabin without extreme effort. He could walk through the snow without fear of falling. He felt a sense of accomplishment that had been missing for years. The stranger's guidance and care had made small victories possible, and he felt gratitude that was deep and lasting. They began to plan for the coming months. The stranger suggested ways to prepare for the spring and how to gather food that could last until the snow melted. He listened carefully and followed her advice. He realized that survival was not just about strength, but about knowledge and preparation. The mountains were still harsh, but he felt more capable and less afraid. The mountain man began to speak more openly about his life and his choices. He admitted that solitude had been both a blessing and a curse. He had found peace, but he had also faced danger alone. He realized that asking for help did not diminish his independence, but it actually allowed him to regain it. He felt a deep sense of respect for the stranger who had entered his life and offered care without expectation. Even as the storm continued outside, the cabin felt like a sanctuary. He could feel the warmth of the fire and the presence of someone who cared for him. He had survived the worst of his illness and the cold, and he felt a sense of hope that he could continue to recover. He knew that challenges would remain, but he no longer faced them alone. The mountain man began to dream again of life beyond the cabin. He imagined walking through the forest with more ease and even speaking to people from the towns below. He realized that the world outside was not as distant or frightening as he had once believed. The stranger had opened his eyes to possibilities he had not considered, and he felt a quiet excitement at the thought of living again. He understood that survival was not just about enduring, but about connecting with others and accepting help when needed. He had learned patience and resilience, and he had discovered that trust and kindness could create miracles in even the most remote and difficult circumstances. He felt gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose, and he knew that his life had changed forever. Mountain Man had grown stronger over the weeks, and the presence of the stranger brought comfort he had not felt in many years. He could move more easily through the snow and manage small chores with confidence. Each day felt like a small victory, and he began to feel a sense of purpose he had. Thought lost, the stranger remained nearby, guiding him patiently, teaching him how to tend to the cabin and the small garden, and how to manage his health in the harsh winter conditions. Despite the improvements, life in the mountains remained challenging. The snow continued to fall, and the wind howled through the trees. The temperature dropped, and ice formed on the cabin windows, making it difficult to see outside. The mountain man sometimes struggled with his breathing, and his muscles ached from the effort of walking through deep snow. The stranger encouraged him to rest when needed and to take small steps. Each small step was celebrated as progress, and he began to feel capable once more. They worked together to gather firewood. He would chop small logs, while the stranger carried the larger pieces to the cabin. They built stacks of wood that would last for weeks and learned to arrange it so that it would burn efficiently. The mountain man realized that teamwork made difficult tasks easier, and that he could accomplish more when he accepted help. He felt gratitude for the stranger and the patient care she provided. One afternoon, as they gathered water from the stream, the mountain man slipped and fell. He landed hard on his side and felt a sharp pain in his chest. The stranger rushed to his side, helping him stand and guiding him back to the cabin. She carefully wrapped him in blankets and made warm tea while checking for injuries. He realized that without her help, he might not have been able to get up from the fall. He felt a deep sense of relief that someone was there to support him. As the days passed, he continued to recover. His strength returned gradually, and he could walk farther without resting. He helped the stranger with cooking and preparing supplies, and felt a renewed sense of usefulness. The cabin felt warmer, not just from the fire, but from the presence of someone who cared. He began to look forward to each day, knowing that he was not alone in facing the harsh winter. They spent long hours by the fire during storms when it was too dangerous to go outside. The mountain man shared memories of his life in the mountains, the challenges he had faced, and the loneliness he had endured. He spoke softly and listened as the stranger shared stories of her experiences helping others. She taught him about natural remedies and small techniques to manage illness and cold. He began to feel empowered by the knowledge and skills she shared. Mountain Man began to notice changes in himself beyond the physical improvement. He felt hope and optimism he had not felt in years. He realized that survival was not only about enduring, but also about connection and learning. He began to see the value in relying on others and in sharing knowledge and care. He felt a deep appreciation for the stranger who had entered his life at a time when he needed help most. Even as he grew stronger, he faced moments of fear and uncertainty. The snow continued to fall, and the cold was relentless. He worried about accidents and illness and whether he could survive if left alone. He shared these fears with the stranger, who listened patiently, offering comfort and encouragement. He learned that it was not weakness to admit fear, and that acknowledging challenges was part of the process of recovery. They worked together to prepare for the months ahead. They repaired parts of the cabin that had been damaged by snow and ice and reinforced the roof against further storms. They gathered food from the small garden and stored supplies carefully. He learned how to ration effectively and to prepare meals that required minimal effort. The mountain man realized that planning and preparation were just as important as strength and endurance in surviving the harsh conditions. The bond between them deepened as they spent more time together. He began to trust the stranger completely and felt safe in her presence. He shared stories of his past and listened to hers. He laughed quietly at shared jokes and felt a sense of companionship he had not experienced for many years. The cabin became more than a shelter. It became a place of learning, growth, and connection. Mountain Man began to dream about life beyond the cabin. He imagined walking through the forest with confidence and speaking to people from the towns below. He realized that the world outside the mountains was not as distant or frightening as he had believed. The stranger had opened his eyes to possibilities he had not considered, and he felt excitement at the Thought of living again despite progress, the mountain man continued to face challenges. He experienced occasional pain and fatigue, and the harsh weather was unrelenting. Some days it was difficult to move through deep snow, and the cold made simple tasks more arduous. The stranger remained patient, encouraging him to rest and take small steps. Each day he felt stronger and more capable, but he knew that caution was necessary to avoid setbacks. They began to organize the cabin for efficiency, learned how to store firewood and food in a way that kept it safe from snow and ice. He learned to cook simple meals that required little energy and to care for his health with small daily routines. The mountain man realized that he had regained not only strength, but also confidence in his ability to manage life, even in difficult circumstances. Mountain Man began to reflect on the lessons he had learned from his time in isolation and the support he had received. He realized that life was richer and more meaningful when shared with another person. He had survived through perseverance, but he had thrived through care and companionship. He began to understand the importance of community and the value of trust and kindness in facing challenges. They spent time discussing plans for the spring. He learned about ways to gather and preserve food and how to manage the cabin as the snow melted. He felt a sense of anticipation for the changing seasons and a readiness to face new challenges. He had gained knowledge, skills, and confidence that would serve him long after the winter ended. The mountain man noticed that he felt happier and more content than he had in years. The fear and despair that had weighed on him in the early months of winter had been replaced by hope and determination. He realized that survival was not only a matter of strength, but also of connection and learning. He felt gratitude for the stranger who had provided guidance, care, and companionship, and who had changed his life forever. As the days continued, the mountain man felt a sense of accomplishment and pride in his recovery. He could manage small tasks independently and could contribute meaningfully to the care of the cabin and the garden. Had regained a sense of purpose and was beginning to envision a life beyond mere survival. The stranger remained nearby, offering support and guidance. But he no longer felt helpless or dependent. He understood that life in the mountains was still difficult, but he faced it with confidence and resilience. He had learned to appreciate small victories and to find joy in simple tasks. He had discovered that trust and companionship could provide strength and hope, and that even in isolation miracles could occur when human kindness was present. He felt prepared to face the remaining months of winter, knowing that he was not alone. The mountain man had grown stronger and more confident as the winter slowly began to ease. The snow was still present in many parts, but the days were longer and the sun shone more often. He could walk through the forest with less effort and could carry supplies without feeling exhausted. Each day he felt a small victory and a growing sense of freedom. The stranger remained nearby, helping him and guiding him through the final months of winter. He had learned to trust her completely and felt safe in her presence. She had taught him how to prepare food efficiently, how to manage his health, and how to move safely. Through the snow, the mountain man realized that her guidance had changed his life. He no longer felt fragile or weak, but capable and resilient. He could face challenges with courage and hope. The cabin felt warmer, not just from the fire, but from the presence of companionship. The mountain man had shared many hours with the stranger. He had laughed and shared memories, and had learned about life outside the mountains. He realized that life was richer and more meaningful when shared with another person. He began to understand the importance of connection and kindness. The snow began to melt. The mountain man felt anticipation for the months ahead. He had regained strength and learned new skills. He could manage the cabin efficiently and had enough food and supplies to last until the next season. Felt confident that he could survive even the harshest parts of winter. Now that he had knowledge and experience, he also felt gratitude for the stranger who had guided him through the most difficult times. They spent time together, repairing the cabin and preparing the garden for spring. The mountain man carried logs while the stranger organized them for storage. He learned to plant vegetables and to gather seeds from the forest. He felt a sense of accomplishment in preparing for the future. He realized that survival was not just about enduring, but about planning and caring for the life around him. The mountain man thought about the life He had lived alone, and the lessons he had learned, he realized that solitude had been both a blessing and a curse. It had given him peace, but it had also exposed him to danger. He now understood that human connection could provide strength and hope he felt a deep appreciation for. The stranger and the small miracles that had brought her to him as the days grew warmer. The mountain man began to explore the forest more confidently. He walked further from the cabin and felt the strength returning to his muscles. He noticed animals and plants he had not seen before. He marveled at the beauty of the forest and felt a renewed sense of wonder. He realized that he had not fully appreciated the world around him when he had been struggling alone. The stranger taught him how to observe the signs of nature and how to move safely through the forest. She showed him how to identify edible plants and how to track animals for food. He felt empowered by this knowledge and began to feel a sense of independence he had not felt in months. He realized that he could survive on his own, but that sharing life with another person made it richer and more meaningful. They shared stories by the fire each evening. The mountain man spoke of his past experiences and the mistakes he had made. In choosing complete isolation, he shared his regrets and his hopes for the future. The stranger listened patiently and offered wisdom and encouragement. He felt a sense of trust and companionship he had never known before. He realized that survival was not just about strength, but about learning and sharing. The mountain man began to dream about life beyond the mountains. He imagined walking to the towns below and meeting people again. He realized that the world outside was not as frightening as he had once believed. The stranger had shown him that kindness existed even in the harshest conditions, and that trust could be placed in others. He felt excitement and hope for the future. As spring approached, the mountain man and the stranger worked together to prepare for the changing seasons. They planted vegetables and herbs and organized food stores. He felt proud of the work they had accomplished, and of the progress he had made. He realized that he had regained strength and confidence. In knowledge, he no longer felt helpless or dependent, but capable and prepared for the future. Mountain Man reflected on the long months of winter and the journey he had taken. He had faced fear, pain, and uncertainty, but he had also discovered hope, companionship, and resilience. He realized that he had learned lessons that would stay with him for the rest of his life. He felt gratitude for the stranger who had entered his life and helped him survive and grow. They spent the last days of winter together by the fire, preparing for the new season. The mountain man felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. He had survived the harshest months and had grown stronger both physically and emotionally. He felt ready to face new challenges and to embrace life with courage and hope. He had learned the value of connection, kindness, and human care. The snow melted and the forest began to bloom. The mountain man felt a sense of renewal as he walked through the trees and observed the life around him. He realized that he had been given a second chance at life, and that the stranger had been a part of that miracle. He felt gratitude and joy at being alive and at having someone to share it with. He prepared the cabin for the warmer months and planned for the future. He knew that he could survive alone if necessary, but he also understood the importance of companionship and care. He felt a deep sense of respect and appreciation for the stranger who had changed his life forever. He realized that human connection could create miracles, even in the most isolated and challenging places. As spring fully arrived, the mountain man felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had regained strength, confidence, and knowledge. He had learned to survive and to thrive. He had discovered the importance of trust, kindness, and companionship. He felt hope for the future and excitement for the possibilities that lay ahead. The mountains were still harsh, but he no longer felt afraid. He had survived and grown stronger because of the care and guidance he had received. The mountain man understood that life was not just about enduring, but about living fully. He had learned that even in the most isolated places, human connection could bring hope and change. He felt gratitude for the stranger who had helped him and for the journey that had taught him resilience, patience, and trust. He felt ready to face the future with courage, hope, and a renewed appreciation for life. He knew that the lessons he had learned in the mountains would stay with him forever. He had survived the harsh winter and had regained strength and confidence. He had discovered the power of human kindness and companionship, and had learned to trust and care for another person. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment and hope for the life that lay ahead. The mountain man had survived a long winter, and the snow was finally melting from the mountains. The sun shone on the forest, and the air was warmer. He felt stronger and more capable than he had in many years. His muscles were no longer weak, and his breathing was easier. He could walk for long distances through the forest and explore the mountains without fear. The stranger remained nearby, guiding him and offering support and care. He had grown accustomed to her presence and had learned to trust her completely. She had taught him how to manage his health, prepare food, and move safely through the terrain. The mountain man realized that her guidance had changed his life. He no longer felt helpless, but capable and resilient. He felt a quiet pride in the progress he had made and the strength he had regained. The cabin felt like a place of warmth and safety. The mountain man had shared many hours with the stranger. They had worked together on chores, prepared meals, and maintained the cabin. He had learned to manage the garden and store supplies. He realized that life was richer when shared with another person, and that trust and companionship could provide strength. In times of need, the mountain man began to plan for the coming months. He knew that challenges would remain, but he felt ready to face them. He planned trips to gather food and firewood and prepared for the possibility of another harsh winter. He felt confident in his ability to manage the cabin and care for himself. He also felt a sense of anticipation for the world beyond the mountains. He spent time exploring the forest with the stranger. He marveled at the plants and animals and noticed signs of life that he had never observed before. He felt a sense of wonder and joy in the beauty of the natural world. He realized that he had been too focused on survival to notice the richness around him, that life could be appreciated even in the most difficult circumstances. The stranger taught him new skills and shared knowledge about the forest. He showed him how to track animals, find edible plants, and use natural resources safely. The mountain man felt empowered by this knowledge. He realized that survival was not only about strength, but also about learning and adapting. He felt a growing sense of independence and confidence in his ability to face challenges. They spent long hours by the fire sharing stories and experiences. The mountain man spoke of his past life in the mountains and the loneliness he had endured. He reflected on the choices he had made and the lessons he had learned. The stranger listened patiently and offered advice and encouragement. He felt a sense of connection and trust that he had not experienced in many years. The mountain man noticed changes in himself beyond physical strength. He felt hope, optimism, and a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that human connection could provide not only comfort, but also courage and motivation. He felt grateful for the stranger and the care she had provided, and understood that his survival had been made possible through trust and companionship. Spring progressed. The mountain man and the stranger worked together to prepare for the warmer months. They planted vegetables and herbs and organized food stores. He felt pride in their accomplishments and satisfaction in the progress he had made. He realized that planning and preparation were as important as strength and endurance in facing the challenges of the mountains. He spent time reflecting on his journey. He had faced fear, pain, and uncertainty, but had also discovered hope, resilience, and companionship. He realized that the lessons he had learned would stay with him for the rest of his life. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the stranger who had helped him survive and for the experiences that had taught him perseverance, patience, and trust. The mountain man began to envision a future beyond the cabin. He thought about visiting the towns below and reconnecting with the world outside the mountains. He realized that the outside world was not as frightening as he had imagined, and that kindness and care existed even in distant places. He felt excitement and hope for the possibilities ahead, and a desire to engage with life more fully. The stranger remained a constant presence, offering guidance, support, and companionship. He had learned to rely on her knowledge and experience, while also gaining confidence in his own abilities. He realized that survival and growth were not just about enduring hardships, but also about learning to accept help and work together. He felt a deep sense of trust and respect for her presence in his life. The mountain man began to see the forest in a new way. He observed the growth of plants and the movement of animals. He noticed changes in the landscape and appreciated the beauty of the mountains. He felt connected to the world around him and understood that life was both fragile and resilient. He felt a sense of wonder that he had almost forgotten in his struggle for survival. They spent time maintaining the cabin and preparing for future challenges. The mountain man chopped wood, gathered food, and helped repair structures. He felt a sense of accomplishment. In contributing to their shared life, he realized that even small efforts were meaningful, and that cooperation could make difficult tasks manageable. He felt pride in his abilities and gratitude for the support he received. The mountain man reflected. On his journey through the harsh winter, he had faced isolation, illness, and fear, but had emerged stronger and wiser. He had learned the value of human connection and the importance of trust and care. He realized that survival was not only about physical strength, but also about emotional resilience and the willingness to accept help. As the days grew longer and warmer, he felt a renewed sense of energy and purpose. He could walk further, explore more, and engage with the world around him. He felt hope for the future and a desire to live fully. He realized that life could be appreciated even in the harshest conditions when one had guidance, support, and companionship. The mountain man and the stranger continued to share stories and experiences. He spoke of his dreams and hopes and listened to her as they laughed, and reflected on the challenges they had overcome and the lessons they had learned. He felt a deep sense of connection and understanding that had been missing from his life for many years. He realized that companionship could provide strength, courage, and hope. He began to make plans for the spring and summer. He wanted to explore more of the mountains, gather resources, and prepare for the future. He felt confident in his abilities and knowledge and was grateful for the guidance and support he had received. He realized that his life had been transformed and that he could face challenges with courage and optimism. The mountain man noticed that he felt joy and contentment that he had not experienced in years. He appreciated the simple pleasures of life, the warmth of the sun, the sound of birds, the growth of plants, and the presence of another person. He realized that survival was not only about enduring hardships, but also about finding meaning and connection in life. As the season continued, he felt a sense of renewal and possibility. He could move through the forest freely, manage his tasks efficiently, and appreciate the beauty of the world around him. He had survived the harsh winter and learned the importance of trust, companionship, and perseverance. He felt hope for the future and excitement for the life that lay ahead. The mountain man reflected on the stranger and the small miracles that had brought her to him. He realized that her presence had changed his life and given him a second chance. He felt gratitude and joy at being alive and at having someone to share it with. He understood that human connection could provide hope, courage, and strength even in the most isolated and challenging circumstances. He prepared the cabin for the warmer months and planned for the future. He knew that life would still have challenges, but he felt ready to face them. He had gained strength, knowledge, and confidence, and had learned the value of trust and companionship. He felt a sense of fulfillment and hope that he had not known for many years. The mountain man felt ready to embrace life with courage, hope, and appreciation. He had survived the winter and grown stronger, both physically and emotionally. He had discovered the importance of connection, kindness, and trust, and had learned to value the small victories of each day. He felt prepared to face the future and to live fully in the world around him.